Good afternoon. I'm Ted Lewis, and we're here today to talk with two distinguished guests from Guatemala about what is happening in their country. The webinar today is entitled Historic Choices, a deep look at Guatemala's elections. And indeed, Guatemala's elections have been in the news a lot recently. If you happen to be, si estás escuchando este programa y deseas escucharlo en español, favor de hacer clic en el globo abajo de la pantalla y puedes escuchar todo en español. The rest of the presentation will be in English. It's being live in Spanish, interpreted on Rompeviento TV. Very fortunate today to have Sandra Moran, who is Guatemala's first openly lesbian member of Congress. She organized the country's first lesbian group in 1995 and was elected to the legislature in 2015. She's well known for her vocal support for women's rights, indigenous women's rights, and LGBT rights in Guatemala. Megan Thomas, also with us this afternoon, is a political analyst, social scientist, researcher, and development worker in Guatemala. Megan was born in New York City of US parents and raised in Guatemala, where she's lived most of her life. She participated in Guatemala's revolutionary movement between 1970 and 1992 and is currently part of the FOCO Action Research Collective, working on generating information and analysis and for social organizing in Guatemala. Thank you to both of you. And before we jump in to talk about what's happening immediately on the elections, if both of you would just be kind enough to introduce yourselves, starting with Sandra. Tell us a little bit about yourselves and your work, and then we want to put your brains to work to explain to us what is happening in Guatemala and why is it so much in the international news these days. Sandra.
Thank you, Ted, and hi, Megan, and hi, everyone who's here with us. And my name is Sandra Moran. I'm from Guatemala, born in Guatemala. I'm a member of the women's movement, building elements for a new constitution for a plurinational state. That's our vision, that's our proposal, and we are working in that. That idea is to complement the other proposals from the organizations, the peasant organization and the indigenous organizations who have been working towards that idea for that proposal for a long time right now. Yeah, and I was a candidate in these elections too. I wasn't elected, but I was a candidate for WINAC political party that is mainly formed by indigenous women, the leaders of indigenous women. Among them, Rigoberta Menchú, and yeah, that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sandra. And we'd like to hear more about your experience in the first round of these elections. We'll be talking a lot more about that. Megan, a little bit about yourself. Megan, I think you're on mute.
Hello to everybody. I'm currently retired, but brought myself back into activity with our Grupo Foco, doing social research for action among social organizations and social movements. What can I say? I've done a little bit of everything because I've been around for so long, right? So I've been a teacher, I've been a journalist, I've been a bookseller. I participated in the women's movement for several years. And then I became a development worker with US organizations, the American Jewish World Service and the Global Fund for Human Rights. And now I am doing things that I've always wanted to do and really couldn't afford to do. So that's me at this point.
Thank you so much. And it's great to talk with both of you, well-seasoned and I'm sure, deeply knowledgeable about Guatemala's history. We look forward to getting your perspectives on the long picture, but right now there's this situation that is been covered widely. I don't know how deeply in the international news. Guatemala's first round of elections back in June brought a very surprisingly strong showing by the Movimiento Semilla, a party that many people had not heard of, and that even some of its own activists expressed surprise at the level of support that they had garnered in the first round of the elections. Guatemala has a complicated electoral field. There's more than 20 parties in contention. So we'll look to you, Sandra, to help us start to understand what exactly did these electoral results mean, and what does it mean going forward to a second round in which two candidates are now chosen. Who are those two candidates, and what can we look forward to in the second round? And further, the courts in Guatemala have sought to discredit this electoral process. If you can tell us a little bit about what is happening on that front, and whether that effort is likely to succeed, or whether it will be pushed back by other courts. The table is yours. Please help us understand this complicated and very interesting situation.
Exactly, complicated and interesting. Okay, well, first of all, yes, we have a beautiful and great surprise that open our hearts and give us happiness and a lot of hope. We start the year, well, last year as movements, we start talking about the challenge that is that the elections was for us. A challenge because we felt that that was the only and the last chance that we have to stop for the corrupt, for the people who have been doing corruption in the countries, who have been co-opt all the state institutions, control of the state institutions. In order to stop them, we felt that that was the last chance that we have. And we start talking about that some of us members of the organizations can be in the list of the political parties, being candidates, and trying to ask people to vote for us and to bring more people into the Congress. We wanted to change the power in the Congress, because until now they have the power, and the left and the progressive deputies are small, just 15 among 160. When I was in the Congress, that we were 5 among 158. Then we wanted to change that unbalanced power that we have there. That was the idea. Then we start this year planning and working and calling people to do a work that can help for that, and to try to recover space, because our feeling is like when the space that was open when we in 1996, when the peace accords were signed, is about to finish. No, that is our feeling. No, that we open that space, and right now it's about to close. Then we need to work in that in order to stop that. Elections was the only way that we can have. Then we start working in that. Some of us went into the as a candidates, and we and last year we were trying to be together in just one front. We couldn't do it, and then was the Movimiento de Liberación de los Pueblos, People's Liberation Movement, was one political party. then Semilla, second political party, and we went in coalition with NAC, URNG, the former guerrilla members. Then we were with some of the members of the social movement, we were together in coalition. But for the first time, I think for the first time, the movement went into and work, not saying you should vote for this, but saying, look, people, there is 24 political parties that are for the rights, and there's five or four political parties that are from the left. If you want to choose from those 5. Don't talk about the other ones, because the other ones is the same thing, the right wing, and they say everything, but they don't, they work toward their own interests. The elections were three months as a process, electoral process, 3 months, March to June. And then on the 25th of June, the surprise was there. The beautiful surprise was there that Semilla won a lot of votes that even them were surprised. They were surprised. They were like, oh my God. No, it's like people really did the thing that I'm saying is I call that as a silent revolution, because we had been persecuted. There are a lot of people in exile. There is journalists in exile. There are judges in exile. There are many lawyers in exile, and many people from different organizations in exile. Then, and we didn't, and we were afraid to take back the streets, because in November 2021 was a lot of persecution against youth, against students. Then we felt that was the possibility that if we take the streets, they also are going to persecute other leaders. Then that was silence revolution, because people took the chance to vote and to decide. Then that happened. Semilla went into, at the beginning was at the first, they went first, and then now they are in the second, this is the second party for the second round. For us, is for the movement, but also for the citizens, it's like it's a new, it's hope there. People is talking about that every day since 26th of June. All of us are very happy, but very challenged, because the ones who wants to continue controlling the state are fighting against, and are using all the tools that they have, using it to trying to stop the second round, or trying to stop Semilla to be in a political party, or to stop people to help Semilla. Then right now we are in that moment. We are fighting, we are trying to help that Semilla have to go into the second round, and we are fighting for democracy. That's our moment, fighting for democracy, fighting for the opportunity for the people in Guatemala to decide who's going to be the next president in Guatemala. The other candidate is Sandra Torres. She has been there. This one is going to be the third moment that she came into the second round. That was, the first one was in 2016 with Jimmy Morales. The second was 2019 with Yamate, and now is the third opportunity for her. And everyone wants to go with her because she has a lot of, many people vote against her, no? And then the second political party who goes to the second round with her kind of win the elections. That's why they are attacking Semilla right now, attacking Semilla directly. And that's
because they believe in the possibilities of Semilla taking the presidency, the popular will. That's what they're really worried about that.
They are worried about it because that's the feeling. That's the feeling that you feel that.
Yeah.
You feel that they really have a chance to win the elections.
Yeah. Well, Megan, can you help us understand a little bit more about the numbers in this election, and then we want to ask you some questions about the policies of the United States and how they are playing into this electoral moment. There we go. Oops, that's the wrong picture.
That is the wrong picture.
There we go. Oops, it's back.
You can make it a little smaller so that we can see there a little more.
I think it's visible now.
Okay. Now, what this graphic is showing us is that this blue column on the left, 24.38%, is people who bothered to go to the polls, but spoiled their vote or turned it in blank without filling it in. So that was the real winner in the elections of June 25th. I mean, these are people who, this is an act of protest. It's not that they didn't turn up at the polls, but that they went and registered to vote, put their name down, and then spoiled their vote or turned it in blank. So that's the real winner. Then the green column with 15% is Sandra Torres, who, as Sandra Moran, who's here with us today, said, is running for president for the third time. So this is kind of her break it or make it. And she has, she's acquired a lot of commitments with a lot of different forces, legal and illegal, right? As one of the main contenders in this. So she is really desperate to win. She has a lot of debts to pay off if she doesn't win. And then Semilla with a humble but very effective 11.78%, which was a surprise to everyone, as we've been mentioning. And the red column is the total vote that the left parties garnered. 3 left parties in this election had a very weak showing, and part of what we in the Grupo Foco are doing is trying to analyze and understand why that happened. Now, the gray column at the far right of the graph, 46.4%, that's the other 23 parties in the contention. They didn't, 2 or 3 of them reached around 7 or 8%. Nobody topped 10%. And then it just kind of drops to 1%, 2% of the vote. And these are all, for the most part, with maybe one exception, which is a very mixed bag, kind of right-wing parties, creatives, many of them as spin-offs of what have been the major parties in the last decade or two in the country. And really what they're seeking is a couple of seats in Congress so that they can barter for their votes, right? These were parties that really didn't have the expectation to win. But I think an important point to add is that among those parties, and it only reached like 7.5%, is the party currently in power. And they really had the expectation to be in the runoff. So they are, many analysts believe that they are really the ones pushing to get Semilla out of the way because they were in 3rd place, so that their candidate can still run. And I think that the main danger—
So that's the motivation for all these shenanigans, is what you're saying?
I think that's the very specific motivation right now, because this case that they're brandishing against Semilla has been open since last year. They could have done this at any time. And they had already moved the case to this Attorney General's, the office that is in charge of the major corruption cases, when there is an office in charge of electoral crimes, right? But they moved it to this special office. So some people from Semillas who were involved in this case, who were being, who knew that they would be charged, have already left the country. They're among the many exiles that Sandra mentioned. But the reason, so they were kind of saving this case. I don't think they expected Semillas to make it to the second round. So they were going to deal with this after the elections. But it turns out Semillas made it to the runoff. So that's why they pulled it out of the hat now.
So if I ask you as a researcher, I look at the gray column and it seems formidable. And if that's made up of right-wing parties, are those votes going to come down? And is it what's the case that they may come over to Semillas? Is that likely? Is it possible? What's the draw?
Well, I think the first thing is looking at the blue column, the people who actively protested in the elections.
Okay.
There were 2 or 3 right-wing parties calling on people to annul their votes. So there's some conservative votes in there, or people dissatisfied because their candidates were disqualified. But that's, that is partly the first place where Semillas can pull votes from. And I think with the other parties, it's not necessarily an ideological vote or a party vote for many of them, but rather many of these parties were running candidates for local government and for Congress, and people were voting there. They weren't necessarily voting for their presidential candidate. So a lot of the people, since the local government elections have been resolved, with the exception of 6 municipalities. For Congress. Well, for Congress have all been resolved, but all the local power for municipal government, for mayors, that has all been resolved, with the exception of 6 municipalities, because there were dissatisfaction, disturbances, it's given different names, but there were protests sufficient to have canceled their elections on election day in June. So those elections have been moved to.
And that's 6 municipalities out of how many in the country?
Out of 340 something. Yeah.
Okay, so a relatively
really a minority,
very small number. Yeah.
It's a very small. Yeah. So
well,
that means that a lot of people, it's not really a party vote. I think those are up for grabs. And then just one last point is that attendance at the polls was around 60%, 61%. So there's a 40% of registered voters that were not motivated to vote. So that's another pool that Semillas can try to appeal to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the story of Semillas candidate Bernardo Arévalo reminds me a bit of the Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas story in Mexico, because there was the son of a very famous and popular president who had helped to institutionalize important things. As a young man in my 20s, I traveled in Guatemala and Central America a great deal, and was inspired by the story of Juan Jose Arévalo, who was a leader who really took something that the United States had been putting out during World War II, the 4 freedoms, very seriously, and won the presidency in Guatemala just after the established Social Security in Guatemala, a Social Security system that still exists, labor codes that are still on the books. He was a real founder of what Guatemala is today. And of course, his successor, who tried to extend democracy and bring about an agrarian reform in Guatemala, was brutally overthrown with the help and the initiation of the Central Intelligence Agency. It was the same time when the Central Intelligence Agency was just becoming a major factor, also overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran the very same year. And we've seen that, that was put down, but Bernardo Arévalo, the son who was born in exile, is now the candidate who has gotten a very impressive 11.7% of the vote. Is that a talk about that story, Sandra? Who is Bernardo Arévalo, and can he win the imagination of the Guatemalan public? Is he the type of leader who can bring what Guatemala needs in this moment?
Well, Bernardo Arévalo right now is a deputy in the Congress. Has been there since in this moment is there in the Congress. And Semilla people have been doing good job in the Congress, and then people knows them as that, no, people committed with the rights of people of different people, and also they are professionals, no, they are well-known professionals, and one important thing is the transparency, no, the struggle against corruption, and their support is mainly in the urban areas. Then they have the challenge now, and I think just these weeks they have been in different places with indigenous people, and the indigenous people also are supporting right now the proposal, because that was some challenge that we knew. Okay, they are more in the urban areas. Let's see what's the indigenous people organizations and communities are saying right now. People are saying that they said "Viva Arévalo." That was the slogan of her dad, no? "Viva Arévalo."
Yeah.
And people are remembering that. Like even my mom always said, yeah, Arévalo was this and that, do this, and I remember when he was that, and like my mom start thinking and sharing stories about Bernardo Arévalo, that, not the former president, the main president in the history of Guatemala. And but also that's the other thing right now, connecting the story, no, connecting the points of the story, of the memory of the people is very good. It's like connecting different generations, and that is very important. That is really very important for any country, connecting generations. And now we are seeing and that we are connecting like 3-4 generations right now with this. Like I hear, for example, people saying, well, I went to vote for Semilla because my children asked me to do it, but because they cannot vote, because they are not the age to vote, but they don't have the age to vote, but they convince their parents to go and vote for them. Then this different generation is very important. Then I feel that also is that something that is going to stay there, no? That feeling of that weaving the generation, weaving the memory, taking back the history, and also the energy of building in Guatemala, the possibility of building, the process of building something positive in among these difficult times that we are in right now. Megan, probably you can talk a little bit.
Mhm.
Yeah, and Megan, that's a beautiful story, and I love what you're saying, Megan. The United States, as you know, has been historically an enemy of Guatemala's democratic processes. From the time of our bends forward, can you give us just a little bit of a sense of what that has meant and what might be different or distinct from that at this point? Are we looking at the same kinds of policies from the US, or is anything evolved in the last 70 years?
That's a long period, but I would say
Yeah, it is.
the US has been supporting the powers that be throughout the entire 20th century, supported counter-revolution, and then has always played it safe. They've been, in the context of the Cold War, they were always more afraid of a left taking power and of revolution. And they lumped democracy into that bag and have continued to support the powers that be. But I would say in the last 10 years, especially, since corruption really took hold in government here, the US has, moved away a bit from that. And I say a bit because it's two main issues in the region, especially the Northern Triangle, as they call it, are illegal migration to the US and the drug war, the war on drugs. So those two things require that they be on working standing with each successive government. So the US has been wavering. I mean, I know for a fact that in the last 10 years, the US support for human rights and even protection for human rights activists has been key. That's where people could go. But at the same time, their public stance of the US is always very kind of wishy-washy. Now, in this case, in this context of the elections, they've come out and stood up for democracy and insisted that the runoff election should happen with the two front runners, and that the courts and other means should not be used to stop the democratic process. So I would say right now, the US is playing an important role, and it's really important for people in the US to kind of be vigilant with that the US should maintain its vigilance and its pressure so that this process can continue. And the country can hold an election in August.
The democratic process, yes.
Election,
and
the election.
Yeah.
Let people select the president they want.
And do you feel that just, to think in terms of strategy in other situations like this in Honduras recently, it seemed like after having been part of a coup d'etat in 2009, the United States was, trying to make the amends and have at least a level electoral playing field. A number of members of Congress came out to support, fair elections in Honduras, signed documents and whatnot. Is that the kind of thing that would help right now in Guatemala, or is the United States being seen as involved actually a problem for the left? I'm just curious about that, because I've seen some media stories that suggest that somehow the U.S. is being seen as a manipulator, that the story coming from the right is that the U.S. is somehow behind the emergence of Semillas and that sort of thing. I know this is propaganda, but is that really taking hold in any way, that idea?
Sandra, do you want to say something, or should I continue?
Continue,
Okay, well,
you can say that.
Okay, I think the thing is that the real kind of true-blooded conservatives are now kind of parroting the US right, the right in the US. They're using the evangelical churches. They follow Trump's guidelines. And when US press, from conservative press from the right, come to Guatemala, those are their sources. And and there's a fluid relationship there. So when Guatemalans want to get into the US press and want this message spread, yes, they're accusing Biden of aiding socialism and communism in Guatemala, which is totally ridiculous. Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard that story. Yeah.
Right, so it, you know, but that's kind of where it's coming from. I think there's a seamless flow now of discourse between these conservative right-wing sectors.
Okay, so that's the right-wing echo chamber. Other people that we've been talking to in Guatemala tell us, and Sandra, I'd like your reflection on this, that social media that there have been attempts to put out these kind of bad stories about Semillas and social media, but that the organic response in social media has been overwhelmingly positive. Can you talk about that a little bit, because that could be a key factor?
Yeah, well, as everywhere, the media has a role in any elections, every elections, no, had a role, and here the main TV channels and the main radio programs are with the right wing, no, and then they always are saying something against Semillas or something against the left or something against the people who are fighting against corruption. But right now we have independent media, but also we have the social media, no, these networks, the social networks that people is using, and I need to say that youth are using the social media very great, and there's a lot of effort and a lot of YouTubers who are helping to put the real history, you know, for example, about Arévalo, president, the history of Arévalo, and right now is in different TikToks. That is the network that
nice.
people is using a lot, no, and then I feel that many people are doing in many ads, many programs, many interviews in their own, and also Semillas has a very good work in that way too. And also the organizations, we are trying also to do something. Then I feel that there is a battle in the ideas, a battle in that field, no? The social media, the ideas, it's a real battle right now in that frame. Very good.
So a battle for the hearts and minds of the citizenry of Guatemala.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, Megan, in our publicity for this event, we aired in talking about the origin of Semillas. We said it was linked to the student movements, which were very inspiring, but it was historically incorrect. Can you tell us what the reality of how Semillas came into existence?
Okay, well, Semillas originated kind of a few years before 2015. But it was a group of intellectuals who were talking about the situation in the country, trying to find solutions, trying to propose a way out, analyzing. And when the 2015 demonstrations erupted, they stood in the Central Park along with the people with a big banner just saying Movimiento Semillas. But so many of those people were, you know, top level intellectuals in the country, including Bernardo Arévalo. That in the midst of the crisis, especially the diplomatic world, they needed somebody to talk to. You know, the government was falling apart. They were, you know, so it was proven that they were corrupt. But when they looked around, there was no other political party to talk to. They were all part of the same kind of corrupt scheme, or they were too far left for them to be talking to them. And they would turn to Semillas, and Semillas was not a political party. You know, all they had was analysis, but they couldn't move on it. So it was their own reflection following that situation that they had to form a political party. So they came together, and early on they tried to appeal to young people, and they met a lot of young people in the Central Park when the demonstrations were taking place. And I think part of their success with youth is they've been sincerely interested in listening to what they have to say, in admiring their energy and their willingness to do a lot of the work, and they're willing. Semillas has been willing to give them a voice in the party. So they ran a lot of young candidates in the elections in 2019. And this time too, I would say they managed to get 23 deputies into Congress. At least half of those, if not more, are under the age of 35. And many are in their 20s. And one of their current deputies, who was also the main leader in the party, for the first 4 years, and who's a current deputy, he's 32. He became a deputy before he was 30 years old. So they've given this, there's this real space for you there. And part of that space was after the first poll on the elections came out and they saw that Semillas was just a sliver, right? They figured that using social networks was what they could do because they had no money for their campaign. Mm-hmm. But they inspired a lot of young people, and that's where it came from. They inspired a lot of young people to they do interviews and go along with what these young TikTokers, for example, wanted to ask them about. And they gained these very popular nicknames, like Bernardo was nicknamed Tio Bernie, Uncle Bernie, or Bernie Sanders. Yeah.
Just like our Bernie, yeah.
Yeah, so it's, it's this kind of more globalized youth, urban youth, that have really been inspired by this. So it is a combination of very, very young people that were surprised. For example, this young woman for whom they issued an arrest warrant is 23, and she's already in exile for participating in forming a democratic party. But that means she became active when she was 18.
And she'll probably be active her whole life. It sounds like
because she's very, very committed and very, has developed a lot of experience for somebody so young. So I think that's another important aspect of this. It has really inspired young people as well. And as Sandra said, it's really a meeting of generations. Young people who probably didn't know who Arévalo was.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And Sandra, you've been a historic leader in the women's movements in Guatemala and in the LGBTQ rights struggles. Do you see a transformation in the landscape coming? You've been part of so many breakthroughs. Tell us what your heart is seeing at this moment.
Well, as in many countries, the context of the fundamentalist idea, the conservative ideas, is very hard and against the LGBT people, and there's a lot of violence, and they are killing people, and it's something very difficult. But I feel that well, we are waiting on Saturday. We will have the big demonstration, the annual demonstration that we have for the LGBT proud demonstration, and I'm hoping that it's going to be big, and I'm hoping that people is going to be there happy, and also I believe that is going to be Semilla there. That the name, like probably not the political party there, but or probably but I'm sure people are going to talk about Semilla in that mobilization that we have on Saturday, because it's an opportunity to break. It's an opportunity to talk, to be there. And that's the feeling that we feel. That's the feeling that is there now. Now is the opportunity. Now or never. Now we need to do it. And the youth wanted that space. And all of us wanted that space, but the youth, especially this youth, and the LGBTQ people needs that space too. Then you know that the conservatives are talking about the gender ideology everywhere, and the churches are saying that Semilla is going to impose that, and I think Bernardo has saying that well, Bernardo is the father of a lesbian who just got married in Mexico, and they are using that. They are using that against Bernardo Arévalo. And people say, come on, how you are using a beautiful thing that your father is giving you, going, supporting your daughter going, and get married in Mexico, because in Guatemala we cannot do it, no? Then he went to Mexico and he said, yes, I went, I did, because it's my daughter. And no, and he said, well, we are not going to introduce any laws. That's the idea, they said, but we are going to fight against the whole violence that is there, and we are going to support that all the rights for all the people. That's the idea, all the rights for all the people, no? Then we are hoping that from that experience, we will have more space to struggle for our rights and to be who we are.
Thank you. Well, I hope Saturday's demonstration is huge and supportive and beautiful. I feel sure it will be. Megan, there you talked about the monopoly on the press. We've heard of something called prensa comunitaria, community press. Tell us about their efforts to sort of break the mainstream blockade on information being accessible in Guatemala.
Well, I think for one, it's important to mention El Periódico and José Rubén Zamora, who is the president of a newspaper, a daily, that had to shut down. And he's been in jail for a year under trumped up charges and ordered by this same judge that is being used to move against Semillas. So now there is only really one major newspaper. And as Sandra was mentioning, especially the local TV channels are all on the side of these corrupt interests and so forth. So that kind of press, and most of the major radio chains. So part of what Prensa Comunitaria has been doing for years now is training young people in local communities that have been in resistance against mining or against huge dams that would ruin their water supplies, or against the spread of African palm, so forth, that's doing a lot of engaging in land grabbing. So Prensa Comunitaria had been reporting on this type of issues, but it's really now with this election that kind of Prensa Comunitaria came into its own more on a national level and has, I would say, dramatically increased its coverage, and its reach. And it has an alliance with, works closely with a network of community radio stations. Mm-hmm. So, together they are, managing to penetrate in different areas now beyond what their original areas were with the resistance movements. So I would say that hopefully Prensa Comunitaria can continue to be a reliable source of information that reaches people who aren't necessarily influenced by kind of the major national press, but that get their information from sources that are closer to them, like the community radios with which Prensa Comunitaria works.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sandra. We're getting toward the end of our hour, but before we go, I'd just like to ask you, what should we be looking for between now and the 20th of August, when the runoff election is to be held? We're assuming that Bernardo Arévalo will be a candidate, though it seems like there's certainly forces at work that would like to derail that. What should we be looking for in the next month as things move forward?
Well, as Megan said, we need to be vigilant that democracy needs to be working, and that our focus will be, or is, that Bernardo Arévalo can be a president, elected a president, and that's our idea. That's going to be our work, and we need to ensure that he is going to run on the 20th of August. Then we will try to stop by media or by legal actions or but street actions, our calling to solidarity actions, that the people of Guatemala has to take the decision, not other people. As the electoral tribunal said, the decision has to be in the polls and not anywhere else, not in the judges. Then that's the focus that we have now. No, that.
And do you think that the forces, those poderes fácticos, the powers behind the scene, are they maybe shooting themselves in the foot, undermining their own case by being so scared? It seems like they have made Bernardo Arévalo into a figure to be reckoned with in a way that he might not have been if they just said, "Oh, that guy got 13% of the vote. Let's forget about him." I wonder what's your take on that?
Yeah, exactly. Now is many people, many more people know about Bernardo Arévalo, but because also it's the news, it's in the news the whole time. It's in the news.
Yeah.
They are fighting against him. They are attacking him. They are saying something against Semillas. People is tired of that. People is tired of that. And also people know them, know that they are the corruption, the corruptors, they are the drug traffickers, they know them, no? Then people is like tired of that and say, well, yeah, shut up. we no, yeah, that's it. We want Arévalo and that's it. No, then thank you very much. I feel like thank you very much, because they are helping Arévalo and Semillas to be well known in the country right now, and even in the international scene too, and that's why.
Yeah, well, here we are talking about it in English, which is very doesn't happen very much, and we hope that we can talk with you again as this process moves forward. Megan, is there anything else you'd like to share with us before we go?
I think what I would like to say is this, that what people are feeling now is a rebirth of hope. The morning of June 25th with the general election, most people were feeling, 40% decided not to go to the polls. Almost 25% actively went to the polls and ruined their votes, but they had to be counted because they didn't see a choice. And the next day, they woke up with the possibility of a real choice. And that has changed the political climate considerably. There's just a sense of hope. And Bernardo, who began his campaign again, the second round campaign last weekend, he went to 5 or 6 different towns that are majority Mayan, and the crowds were just overwhelming. And these were not places where he had majority vote. And in a video, you can see a woman walked up to him and said, "I'm going to vote for you. I'm placing my trust in you. Don't betray my trust." And I think that's the way people are feeling, that he's somebody they can trust, and they haven't felt that in politics for a long time.
So it sounds like there's a real groundswell, and it really does remind me of what happened in Mexico in 1988 when Cuauhtemoc Cárdenas won the election. In that case, the fraudsters stepped in and stole it from him in a most evil way. Let's work together to make sure that doesn't happen ever again. So much. I'm so grateful to both of you for spending this hour with us, and we look forward to staying in touch with you as this process goes forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.